Hey friends, my name is Jake. Welcome to Canadian Cutting Edge. Today we're taking a look at the Kicker by CJRB Knives. It's got a form of the access lock called the Recoil Lock, and I'd like to show you that now because at the table I won't be able to show you quite as well. Instead of having it at the sides, it's at the top here, and there's a piece at the top that you can pull back and then the blade can fall. It's just loose. You can also pull, hold it right on the sides. So let me pull it on the side here. So it goes that way. Let's see if I can get it close to the camera, if it'll focus on it. There we go. Pull back and it falls. Or pull on the top and it falls. Which means I can flick it with the flipper, drop it, or I can I can flip it with the flipper, use the lock to undo it, but I could just use the lock as well. Instead of flipping it open, I can just use the lock as well to do that. So open and close it just using that lock system. So yeah, it's a very interesting lock system. Basically, it's the access lock changed slightly. They call it, like I said, the Recoil Lock. Other than that, it's a very standard G10 D2 steel kind of blade. Deep pocket clip, right and left, all the very standard kind of stuff. So if you're interested, stick around. The full review's coming right now. So here we go, the Kicker. What's the kicker about this knife? The lock. The lock is the kicker. It's this thing right here. But before we get to it, let's talk about the basics of it. First off, the size. Compared with the Ontario Rat 1, it is a similar size knife. Lining up the pivot pins, the handle length is very close to the same. You can see by my finger on the end there. The blade length is very close to the same as well. It's just a little bit shorter in every length measurement, except for, the cutting edge. Lining those up, it's very close to identical. It's a very tiny bit less of a cutting edge. So yeah, it's a big knife without being supersized at all. We've got a flat grind that doesn't go to the spine, so a saber grind. We've got a clip point that some people like to call a reverse tanto. Not me, because there's nothing sharp over here, like I keep saying. But the tip itself is at a fine enough angle there that it's decent for doing some fine work. You can't get a very good grip behind that tip, but it's decent for doing some fine work. The cutting edge, it's fairly sharp from the factory. We've got a nice belly along here and a little bit of a straight section. The sharpness choil is just big enough to go past the plunge right there. And, the spine is flat, rounded, softened edges, just a little bit. Stonewash everywhere. Small writing on it, as we usually see from CJRB. J1915 D2 right up there. And then right here it says China. And on this side, CJRB, which is Artisan Cutlery's budget line. Below this video, I'll have links for where you can buy this knife, coupon codes. You can save 10% at White Mountain Knives. If you want to buy it from Amazon.com, I've got links for that as well, referral links, so that, well, it's going to cost you the same amount of money no matter if you use my links or not, but you'll be helping me out if you use my links. So I would very much appreciate it if you would use my links for that. So that's pretty much the discussion about the blade. The flipper. The flipper is kind of unique. It's sort of squared off on the leading edge there. We've got a little bit of jimping right on the front of it. And then it's a flat top. So pushing down on an angle doesn't really work all that well. You have to be pushing pretty much at less than a 45-degree angle if we're counting it from here. That's less than a 45-degree angle to get it to open. Whoops, scratching the tabletop. So you can do it that way, but clearly it's designed, since the texture's on the front, to pull back in a light switch method, pulling straight back like that to deploy the blade, which works just fine. And I also showed you before, just pushing on the side of it, that is pushing it back like this, that caused the blade to just fall. So you can do that just on one side if you want to. It's really hard to do though, because you're reaching so far to do it. But with your finger or pinky finger around the pocket clip, it's very easy to get a good grip up here, and you just pull straight back and then the blade comes loose. So if you pull the switch back, the recoil lock, then it is free to move. And it is functionally at the end here just like an axis lock. It's just the point of contact for your fingers is at a different spot. That's the only difference. How it locks up is identical to an axis lock. The Omni spring system in here, it's identical. Here's an exploded view of the knife. And so there you can see the coil springs, the Omni springs. I guess you can call them a coil spring in a sense, but not like a traditional coil spring. It's a rounded spring. So I guess that's where they were getting the coil term from. I don't like this axis lock, to be honest with you, this recoil lock, for one main reason. They used a foundry method to make this piece of metal here, and it looks cheap. It looks like cheap white metal, and that's unfortunate. It would cost an awful lot more for them to mill this part. And so there's a reason why it's, foundry part. That means it's been poured into a mold. Molten metal has been poured into a mold to create this piece. It makes sense to me why they did it. The knife is a budget knife. It's under $40 US. And if they had to mill this whole piece out of one other piece of metal, I think the price of the knife would have to go up, because that would take time, and time equals money. There's texture across the top. It's easy for you to get your finger on there to pull it back. It's a decent system. It's very fidget friendly. So, you hold that back and you can, flick it open, flick it closed. And the flicking it closed is I pull this back, move my wrist forward, start that going, and then I have to let go of the spring tension after it gets past this point right here. Because right here, it wants to stay open because the Omni spring's pushing on there, and it wants to stay open. And then once it passes that point, then it wants to stay closed. So you've got to keep pulling this back until it gets past that point where it overcomes right there. So you got to get the blade up to about here before you let go of that spring. Because if you let go before that, it'll stop. So it does take a bit of fidgeting to get used to doing that. But you don't have to use the flipper at all. If you did cut the flipper right off, you could still easily deploy this knife just using that axis lock and the right movements of your hand and arm. It's okay. I like how it works. I just don't like how that piece of steel looks. And it's loose. It shakes back and forth. And nobody wants a rattle on a knife, do they? The handle here. I like the handle. The G10's flat G10 with a fairly coarse texture on it, which adds the grip. The edges are chamfered and rounded quite nicely, comfortable, very comfortable in hand. There's no separate choils here. It's just one, wave on the belly. So no matter what your hand size is, you're going to find a way to get comfortable in there, which is a good thing. Very good for reverse grip with the back this way. Even a pull grip isn't bad if you pull your thumb around. It's comfortable. The pocket clip is a deep carry pocket clip. It's flat on the front. It's got flush screws in there. Goes right side and left. They don't have to have a section milled out on the G10. So the opposite side doesn't look bad. You just have a couple little holes there. So, yeah, it's pretty good pocket clip. So let's demonstrate it going into a pocket. Here we've got a pair of pants. And it wants to climb over right away, and it just goes to the full depth right away. If you use the gray G10, which I call gray blue, it's somewhat similar to the color of denim. You do see the pocket clip sticking out, but other than that, you know, the knife, even though it's poking out a little bit, still is, you know, fairly well concealed in the pocket. By the way, the other colors are OD green and black. That's all you get from the G10, or you can get the G10 base with the carbon fiber laminate, which is smooth and slippery, and it costs a few bucks more. I don't like flat carbon fiber laminate. I've had it on a few knives, and I just don't like it because it tends to be too slick for my liking. Just a smooth backspacer. There's no jimping in there for any traction or anything. Doesn't need to be, so that's fine. We've got brass rings here for the collars, for the pivot collars. Quite nice, very common on the CJRB knives. Button screws to hold it together, and they're recessed. So this is about the best execution of button screws that I have found. Now, I've not tried to take this knife apart yet, so just before we do the dimensions and everything, we'll take this guy apart just a little bit, not completely. I don't like taking access locks all the way apart. Okay, so I took the G10 off. I did have to use drive grip. I was concerned that I was going to do a little damage to the screw. The screws usually are pretty good and strong, but I just wasn't, for some reason, it didn't seem to fit my driver very well. But here you go. On the access lock, this part usually extends and has the texture on it, and you pull that part back. All they did was add this piece here, and let's pull that out of the way. So that pulls it back. You can see how they made this. They have, whoops, oh, those pins come all the way out very easily. So there's a pin here that guides it. Where's my, so right there, oh, it's got a little magnetic on that driver. That's something that can be very easy to lose if you take the knife apart. I didn't realize that that was just free sitting in there. I wonder if this one's the same way. Yep. That one's the same way. Now, where did it end up? I think it fell all the way to the floor. I'll have to go find that pin right now. Let's put it back in there. So yeah, if you take this knife apart, be very careful not to lose those little pieces. I sometimes use a little bowl that's got a magnet on the bottom. You can buy those at auto parts stores. That's a very good idea. And I just didn't use it this time to catch little pieces and parts. That's as far as I'm going to take this apart. So I'll put it back together and we'll continue with this video. All right. Now it's time to go over all the sizes, dimensions, and all that kind of information. How much does this knife weigh? It is 129 grams. That's 4.55 ounces. Not a bad weight for a full-size knife. The sharpness from the factory, 75 best. That's very sharp from the factory. So they did a good job with getting a sharp edge on this knife. The cutting edge length, 83 millimeters. That's 3.267 inches. Blade length, tip to the closest spot on the handle, 89.1 millimeters, 3.508 inches. The thickness of the blade, 3.11 millimeters, that's 0.1225 inches, so right around 1/8 of an inch thick. The blade depth, this measurement, it's largest right here at the heel of the blade, 25.3 millimeters, 0.996 inches. The thickness behind the grind, and I measured it, right in this area where we tend to do most of the cutting. 0.53 millimeters, that is 21/1000ths of an inch thick. The grind angles, well, I'm going to say if you measure this area, it's about 18 and about 19 degrees. But in reality, 21.1, about 19, and then it goes down to 18, and it ends at 17.3 degrees. And on this side, It starts at 18, and it's 18 for a good half of the blade, and then it starts increasing until it ends at 21.0 degrees up here, which is a 3-degree change, which is less of a variability than most knives that I review. So CJRB did a pretty decent job sharpening this knife. The handle now, the handle length, 121.3 millimeters, 4.775 inches. The grip area, it's a little more than 10 centimeters, a bit more than 4 inches. So yeah, this knife is good for extra large hands. They did a good enough job with the dimensions here that men's medium hands are still going to find this knife fairly comfortable. The thickness of the handle, 12.9 millimeters. That's 0.508 of an inch, so half an inch thick. The handle depth within the grip area, it's largest right here, 24.2 millimeters, 0.952 inches. And up here, I didn't measure that before, just over 3/4 of an inch right there. That's about 2 centimeters. The knife, when it's closed, the deepest measurement, or the width right up here, 38.5 millimeters, 1.516 inches. And the total length of this knife from the very tip to the tail, 210.5 millimeters, equals 8.287 inches. So just over 8¼ inches, 3.5 inches here. That's a good ratio. And the balance point, I usually do that in with the specs as well, is right there. Again, I'd like it to be up here, but not bad at all. It's got a good balance. All right, the summary. What do I like? What do I not like? What are my feelings about this knife? Cutting performance. I wish it was a full flat grind. It cut fairly well, but it does get, to the full thickness fairly quickly. It cuts okay. For an EDC knife, it's a decent cutter. Like I said, they did a decent job sharpening it, and, it cut fairly well. There's no jimping anywhere at all on here. Maybe a little bit would be nice. A little bit here, I guess you could call that jimping on the Recoil Lock top. And because it comes up and then back down, it does become a place to put your thumb. And in fact, if you put your thumb at the back of it and you're pushing sort of forward that way, or if you're holding it this way, you're pushing down a little bit that way, you're actually keeping the lock engaged as well. So you're really giving it extra strength. It doesn't really need it. That axis lock is very strong the way it is. Handle, comfortable. I like the pocket clips right and left. It's a good pocket clip. Lanyard hole placement, it's not bad. They just slightly chamfered the edge of the hole there, so that's kind of nice. I don't know. This is the first knife that they've made with this lock. I don't know if they've got more of them out yet. I haven't just been keeping that much track of CJRB lately. In part because, yes, it was in October that I needed the pin for the lanyard pin for the biome. Still don't have it. It is March 13th when I'm recording this. Yeah, we still don't have that pin. So I still believe that the post-sales customer service from CJRB is very, very poor. This gentleman, Russell, he is too busy. He's got too much going in his life. That's my presumption. I'm assuming that that's so because when I email him, I generally get no response. So I'm not holding out hope to get a pin for that biome. And so that means I can't hold out hope, if you buy a CJRB knife or an artisan cutlery knife in North America, I can't hold out hope that you will get good customer service either. So yeah, in 2021, I'm not buying any knives from Artisan Cutlery or CJRB. I'm just going to finish reviewing the ones that I have. I've got one knife left from CJRB that I'll be reviewing after this one. The knife itself, the build quality that you actually get with this thing is good. I like it. Is it worth $40? Certainly. White Mountain knives, the price is $39.99. Take off 10% with coupon code CCE, and it's $35.99. Thanks for watching my video. Thanks for liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. And remember, friends, always cut towards your chum, not your thumb. Bye for now.